Mr. Horrocks, you have indeed won the bet. After only one race weekend, we are here to celebrate the first, hopefully of many, Lando Norris victories in Formula One. I cannot believe I'm saying that, and I cannot believe I'm going to have to get I'm going to have to get my head shaved. Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Tom Downey, and joining me today, we are going to discuss the 2024 Miami Grand Prix. Joining me, we have Rachel Kapusta from the Paddock Pals podcast.
Hello.
Hello. We have Jonah Hill, who is an F1 writer, gamer, all-round just badass legend.
Hello.
Hello, mate. And finally, we have none other than Philip Mathew from the Grip Trip podcast.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. So just before we get into this episode, we must thank our sponsors, Bet Online. The Bet Online is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores are available to follow for your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Also, please do be sure to follow us on our new socials at Grid Talk UK to stay up to date with the show. So now that the admin is out the way, and now that I can sort of finally calm down a bit, now that Lando has actually won a race, we're going to talk about the Miami Grand Prix where Lando Norris won a race. If you can tell, I'm quite happy that, Lando Norris won a race. So there's only one person who I'm going to sort of start this with, Jonah. Self-proclaims bit of a McLaren Lando fan, the flag in the backgrounds. There's a bit of sort of a giveaway there. Off you go.
Man, I'm just absolutely on cloud nine. There's really no other way to put it. It's been a long time in the making, a lot of fumbles along the way, no football pun intended, considering they're racing in front of Hard Rock, but it's just, I'm so happy for the guy. I'm so happy for the team. I'm the definition right now of that meme that's like, he thinks he's on the team. Like, that's what I am right now. Just everything fell into place. There's no better way that I think this weekend could have gone other than maybe the Leafs not losing last night. But the McLaren looked really good. Really good. I would say it's tough because the upgrade package, we got the full thing on Lando's car this weekend, half of it on Oscar's car. Oscar looked like the stronger car at the beginning of the race until Lando switched into some scenario 7 mode when he just went ballistic and he was catching Carlos and he pulled away from Max at the safety car. I haven't seen this from the guy since Austria 2020, that level of just locked in. And I'm happy that we saw it. There's no other person on the grid I would rather win a race right now than Lando. It's so deserved. The team looks stoked. Overall, I mean, I hope this is a sign of things to come, that McLaren is competitive, is going to remain competitive, and that this upgrade package is really going to make a difference, because I don't want a sense of false hope is kind of what I'm worried about. But, oh, man, I'm on absolute cloud nine. It does not get better than this. It doesn't.
No, absolutely. How long have us F1 fans waited for something like this? And I'm going to break sort of like the tradition or the sort of like unspoken rule of grid talk just today, because normally we just go sort of through, talking points driver by driver. But given the occasion, we're all going to talk about it a bit. So next of all, Rachel, you are indeed sporting the lovely Lando t-shirts. I think we're all sort of happy that Lando has won today. Tell us your thoughts a little bit on his race and his first, hopefully, of many victories in F1.
Yeah, it was great to see. I was so excited for him. I feel like Lando's just a really popular driver in general. So he has so many people that have been wanting this for him. So it was great to see it. Once he got past Sergio Perez and that DRS, powerful DRS and the Red Bulls, he was off. He was to the races, just like Jonah said. You couldn't stop the man. He got very, very lucky with that safety car as well. So it's just kind of like everything fell into place for him today. He made a comment after the race that he felt like today's going to be the day. I did wonder how many times he's thought that before, and this time maybe it was the time that it came true. But it was great for them. I think it's great for the team just as they've been improving each year. So I'm just really excited for the team, and I'm cautiously optimistic that hopefully they can keep this up and keep challenging. We would love to see them get a little bit more competitive with Red Bull. I'm sure a bunch of teams we would love to see that, but it was such a great day for Lando. I was so happy for him. His smile from ear to ear. Of course, he had his bandaged nose, and that's what we're always going to remember is first race was won after a party weekend where he busted his nose open. But that's okay. Good for Lando.
I mean, if it works for him, maybe going out clubbing or something is perhaps that's the sort of secret ingredient that we've been missing up until now. And Phil, I just want to come to you on this quickly, and then we will talk about the others because there were 19 other drivers, despite Kevin Magnussen's best efforts in the race today. I mean, I've said it already. Lando, obviously won. He started from fifth. Did benefit from the safety car that was caused by Verstappen, which we'll talk about in a minute. Or certainly, there were repercussions of Max sort of causing the incident, as you would call it. Just give us your thoughts quickly on Lando winning in F1.
I mean, it's always great to see a first-time winner in Formula One. 110 races to get to that point. It harkens back to the likes of Jensen Button and some of the other guys that had to wait a while to get their first win. In his case, I mean, the McLaren bringing that upgrade package to be able to go and be so fast out of the box. I guess $25,000 penalty for crossing the track illegally doesn't really matter too much anymore. When Zach Brown's probably going to give him one of his cars or something in between the rally they're going to be going to. But either way, I mean, Lando Norris, outstanding performance. And like everyone else has said, I mean, he was due to have this win. And I mean, it's good. It's nice to one of the only times recently that I've actually sat and watched green lights to flag Formula One race. And it was a rare instance where the usual suspect didn't win, so I'll take it. But it's 2 for 2 for me, so maybe I guess I have to watch every race then. Maybe it would change, but I'll take Lando Norris winning a race. That's good for the world as we move towards Imola here in a couple of weeks' time.
Absolutely, and like you said, Phil, it's good for the world, it's good for the sport, it's good for the soul. So speaking of things that were perhaps not so good for the soul, or indeed, good for the car. Max Verstappen finished P2 after having started P1, and his teammate Sergio Perez finished P5 after starting P4, but also after sort of going, "Ooh, look, a penny" into turn one, and then almost sort of absolutely wiping out even his own teammates. The Red Bulls, Rachel, do you think that they will sort of see this as an opportunity missed, especially with Max causing the VSC, and then which in turn caused the safety car? He hit the bollard at the chicane. I think it's turn 13, 14. He hit the bollard of that chicane. It blew onto the racing line. Then someone else hit the bollards because obviously he was sitting there. And then he just couldn't catch Lando. he could not, whether he just sort of settled for second, I find that hard to believe for Max Verstappen. And then Perez, obviously in P5 in the end, had a bit of a mare. Will Red Bull sort of see this as a sort of almost like a loss for them this weekend, do you think?
I feel like Red Bull might see this, as I feel like a lot of us did, as like a shock. It was like, wait, is there a chink in Max Verstappen's armor right now? Like, did he really just make a mistake? He's always so on point. So like when I saw him go over that curb and hit the cone, or bollard, I guess you would call it, right? Bollard. So when I saw that, I was shocked. I was just like, wait, did that really just happen? And did Max really do that? So yeah, he definitely did himself in and probably cost himself the race, which I know he won't be easy on himself about. But yeah, and then as you mentioned on the restart, I feel like at first I thought Lando really took off at a bad part and the Red Bull was going to catch him immediately. I thought Max, he was going to be right there, and Lando should have maybe waited before he took off after that safety car. But then I think he had Charles right behind him, which really helped Lando, because Charles also got a really good start after the safety car, and Lando was able to pull ahead. But yeah, it was seriously no weather, no other factors really came into this. It was just that the McLaren was better. And I think the Red Bulls are going to be a little like, oh, wow, impressive. And we're going to have to do something about it. Checo really, it was kind of shocking how he just got stuck back there and couldn't pass the Ferraris either. I mean, not entirely shocking because it's Checo and he obviously doesn't have as good of grip on the car as Max does. So we don't expect the same things from them. But that he couldn't pass the Ferraris, it was kind of shocking too. So maybe it was just like a perfect storm of this track not suiting them. Maybe something was wrong and the baller did actually mess something up on his front wing just a little bit that gave McLaren that extra edge. But I don't think they're necessarily take this as like a major loss, but maybe just things to ponder for the future and how to make sure this never happens ever again for their sweet baby Max Verstappen, and make sure that he keeps that trophy on his head.
Tell us how you really feel. Yeah, no, it's maybe these are like signs of Red Bull sort of starting to crack. Obviously, we've had confirmation this, sort of on this weekend that Newey's leaving. All of a sudden, they don't quite win. Is this where the downfall begins? We can only wait and see. But Jonah, a team that will absolutely be waiting to sort of pick up the pieces is Ferrari. So they started P2 and P3 with Leclerc P2 and Sainz P3, and they have finished P3 and P4 in the same order. There were some calls early on that they should have swapped positions, as Sainz was apparently faster. Ultimately, they didn't, and at the time of recording, Sainz has been summoned to the stewards because he's been a very naughty boy, and he had that incident with Piastri at turn 17. That obviously ruined Piastri's race, which we'll sort of talk about a bit as well. He ended in P13 after having to make a pit stop and change the front wing because it's completely mangled. So the Ferrari's ending P3, P4, and then Piastri ending P13. Bit of contrasting fortune for those two, bearing in mind that they started relatively close on the grid.
Yeah, I mean, so I wasn't on the shows earlier in the weekend or anything. So I just, before I get into the Ferrari's tactics on track, I want to say my personal opinion. God, that livery was hideous. I hated everything about it. Don't hype us up for a blue livery and then give us a stripe. I'm sorry, underwhelming, disappointing, ridiculous. Anyways, onto their on-track antics. To me, that seemed like an uncharacteristically frustrated Carlos Sainz on track. Is that partially the Oscar Piastri incident? I don't think Oscar did anything wrong. I'm on Martin Brundle's side, as in that's hard, fair racing. Ignore the flag in the back. It's not bias. That's just racing. We've seen that all over the place. If you want to penalize that, you want to penalize racing. I don't think it was penalty worthy. And I think the stewards made the right call. It wasn't a penalty. That was just an uncharacteristically frustrated drive from Carlos Sainz, starting, in my opinion, from sitting behind his teammate and Ferrari not making the call. Is that surprising? Not necessarily. Ferrari tends to not make strategy calls pretty frequently, but it's pretty blatant. Carlos looked like the faster driver. You could see he was right on Charles's tail. Swap him if it doesn't work, swap him back. I don't see the point of just putting them there. You're sacrificing both your drivers to just sit there. The McLaren was quick and Oscar Piastri. Yeah, but if Carlos thinks he's got a shot, give him the shot. If not, swap him back. I don't understand it. That, I think, frustrated Carlos, and then Oscar with some rough defending, I'll call it, to make some Ferrari fans, I guess, happy. You could say that it's hard, but it's fair. And Carlos wasn't a fan of it. He was yapping on the radio, complaining the whole time. Which, I mean, listen, man, put your head down if you don't like it and go catch him the fairway. Like, don't complain about it the whole time. Put your head down and go catch him. He didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, did he shove you off? Maybe a little bit. But we saw a few drivers do that earlier in the race, and there was no incidents, nobody complaining, no nothing. He's not going to hand you the position. You weren't ahead at the apex. That's not your corner. I don't care what anybody says. If that's the ruling, that's the ruling, and the stewards clearly think the same thing. Then, moving forward, throwing it up the inside and pretty much parking your car on the apex. He literally stopped his car. You could see it kick out in the rear there. It was almost doing 0 at the apex where Oscar's got nowhere to go. That's a blatantly frustrated Carlos Sainz. Charles, I mean, it was an okay race. I don't think he did anything special. I don't think he did anything bad. If you're in a Ferrari and there's one Red Bull ahead of you in Max Verstappen, if you finish behind the other Red Bull, you did something wrong. So I think that for Charles, it was a good race. Good to be on the podium. Good points for the team. But I wouldn't be surprised if Carlos gets some kind of repercussions from the stewards for, I mean, blatantly almost ending Oscar's race with a move that didn't need to happen. It just didn't. And he looked frustrated.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it, Johnny. There was evidently a lot of frustration that that was sort of on show that today, and especially given he's fighting for his F1 future, you can kind of understand why it's perhaps cut through. But Sainz was obviously sort of having a bit of a whinge. And speaking of whinges, Lewis Hamilton finished P6 and George Russell finished P8. Sorry, I had to get that one in. Phil, bit of a sort of mixed fortunes in a way for your boys today. They were, certainly Hamilton wasn't happy with the balance of the car. And, he wasn't happy with the straight line speed of it. Ultimately, P6, P8. Bearing in mind we only had, I think, one DNF, which was Logan Sargent. Do you think Mercedes can be sort of happy with that? Obviously a team like Mercedes is going to want more, but do you think, given the relative pace of the car, and they were ahead of the Aston Martins, they were ahead of Haas, Alpine, and then sort of those kind of runners. Do you think they'll think, especially with the safety cars, potentially an opportunity missed today, or do you think they'll be sort of happy with where they are?
It's fine. You can get your daggers in. You're not going to have hair soon. But, in terms of, Lewis, I mean, he was battling Sergio Perez for a good amount of that race. If it was a Mercedes of yesteryear, which wasn't an absolute dog, he probably would have been able to pass Sergio Perez. But given all the limitations that were there, getting a 6th place finish, it's sad that we have to celebrate that. But, greener pastures theoretically for him, moving forward for Sir Lewis Hamilton, where he's going to be going. George Russell was kind of invisible most of the weekend. Yes, he outqualified Lewis. That seems to be the thing these days. But per their time together, for the most part, Lewis has outperformed George in races. When it comes to this weekend, they were definitely the third team. Aston Martin, whatever their upgrades were, definitely didn't upgrade much of anything, unless it made their cars slower on street courses. Fred was generally anonymous. The other guy did what he usually does. So they were able to beat Aston Martin. They're well behind McLaren in constructors' points. But for what their car is, what their pace is at the moment, that was probably as good as it was going to be. There was no DNFs amongst those 3 teams, or they're being that 4th best team is what they are at the moment. And first top 6 finish for Lewis in a while, which is sad to say also, unless there's plenty of people who don't like him, which is fine. You don't have to like greatness. I don't have to like greatness for certain people, and it's the same way. So we'll take it. Going to Imola, Monaco is going to probably not be. These next couple of Grand Prix are not going to be ideal, I would think, for what Mercedes is doing, unless they bring that massive upgrade and they hit something like McLaren did last year at Silverstone. But for what they are right now, I think about as good as it was going to be.
Yeah, and obviously with next year, there's going to be a new driver, and maybe a sort of slight change of philosophy. I do think we'll see Mercedes a bit further up the grid, because they're a team that, let's be fair, they know how to win, and let's also keep an eye on them for 2026, because the last time we had the last time we had sort of big engine regs, it's safe to say Mercedes got it pretty spot on. But Jonah, let's have a quick look at the RBs. So Yuki Tsunoda finished P7 after starting P10. He was having some blinking good battles around him. And then Daniel Ricciardo, back where he belongs, in P15 after qualifying last. After everybody at Sky was thinking, he was the second coming of Christ, and finishing P4 in the sprint. Well, after all that greatness, he's back down to mediocrity, you could say. The RBs, bearing in mind how poor the car was this time last year, and obviously, last year they had bowling ball De Vries into turn one, who wiped out actually today's winner, Lando Norris. If you didn't know, he won today, and I'm quite happy. My hair isn't. But no, the RBs, certainly with their sort of like Instagram looking front nose, they are certainly for Yuki, it seems to be a bit more sort of like business as usual for them, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think business as usual is an interesting way of putting it, considering that they're the RBs. But I guess I'll start my second segment here also with the livery topic. Man, that was beautiful. I think it's gorgeous. No marketing, no nothing. They throw that out there a few days before. Stunning. I really liked it. Now, I have to understand what's going on in Daniel Ricciardo's head, because how do you go from P4 in the sprint in a car that, let's be fair, has no business being there, but being P4 in the sprint and then getting smoked by a guy who I have a hard time believing can actually see over the steering wheel? I don't understand how it's just like so blatantly bipolar, his results. Like, it's something so good and then something so mid. Like, there's no other way to put it than it's just so mid. It's 15th, probably not where an RB should be considering the teams below it, but Yuki stuck that thing 7th. The guy's got 10 years less experience you do. He's never driven a car that's race winning. You have a few race wins under your belt. You know what it takes to win. I can't wrap my head around what's going on in Danny Rick's head. Part of me thinks that's a good thing because, man, his time at McLaren sucked, and there's just, I don't know what it is. It's got to be like the biggest case of the yips, because that car clearly has some potential behind it, considering where Yuki's putting it. Now, on the Yuki side of things, man, I love this guy. Like, how can you not love this guy? He's doing so well in this car. He's like, there's this little ball of energy, and I love to see him succeed. I really do. And I'm not a Red Bull enjoyer, I'll say. I like Hondas, the road cars. Don't love how good they are at this, considering it's not the 80s anymore. But I don't know. I can't help but be happy that Yuki's doing well, and I also can't help but fear that Danny Rick's seat is a little bit less and less his every race that he continues to finish below Yuki. Who's that going to be? I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but I have a feeling that it won't be Danny next year. And I just don't understand how you can go from doing so well in the sprint to having, the same vehicle. Maybe it's a different setup, but how drastic of a setup change can it be that you're that bad in the same car that you did so well in yesterday? I don't understand. I can't wrap my head around it. Good on you, Yuki. Keep doing what you're doing, man. And Danny, God, I hope you figure it out. Like, I don't know. It's hard to understand.
Yeah, and like you said, maybe it's a good thing that we don't try and understand what's going on in his head, because like you said, he's getting beat by a guy who's not been in anything anywhere near a race-winning car. The closest thing he would have been the 2021 AlphaTauri as it was back then, because ever since then they've been on a sort of bit of a downward slope, one could say. So yeah, so absolutely, that was another 5-star drive from Yuki. And segue, if you think this is a 5-star podcast, well, you can absolutely leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're one of the 72% of people who are not yet subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. Now that I bossed that, like Lando bossed his first win in F1, if you didn't know, he won the Grand Prix today. It's now time to have a quick look at the Aston Martins. So we've gone from speaking of bossing things to probably more speaking of bottling things. Phil, the Astons, well, this is going to be good, especially as you're not a fan of either driver. So Fernando Alonso had a pretty dismal qualifying. He qualified P15. He ended the race P9. Ahead of his absolute best friend Esteban Ocon, and then Lance Stroll, where was he? Oh, he's 17th. Don't care about him. So the Astons, bearing in mind they were sort of showing a bit of promise. Certainly, last time out in China, they've had a real slump, haven't they? A pretty dismal showing in quali, and only sort of just scraping a point with Lance Stroll down in, where was he? P17. Yeah. Great job, buddy. Just give us a couple of thoughts. Keep it clean, because it's your favorite driver, Fernando Alonso, and just give us your thoughts about the race and their quality performance.
No, my favorite driver finished second today. But anyways, in terms of my second favorite driver, you talk about guys that have a hard time seeing over the dashboard. He's another one when he isn't trying to be Napoleon. But the fact is, I don't know what they were trying to do with this upgrade. Maybe it'll show better at Imola in a couple of weeks' time, but it definitely didn't match the high temperatures, the whatever track that Miami provides. They seem to be on the back foot from the jump. The qualifying session for Alonso to not even to be as far back as he was, you're basically taking any chance out of having real points. Getting up to ninth, assisted, of course, by Haas, because they're Haas. And, and then I forget who else was really up there where he went and benefited. I mean, it's Alpine. Yeah, there. So his former employer there, at least, 3 times, or 2 times, and then so whatever, they got a couple of points. That's damage limitation for Aston Martin. Lawrence's son, just driving around, making up the numbers, and he didn't hit anybody, so that's a win for him. Kevin Magnussen decided to be like him this weekend, so yeah, I wonder, you have more people in the garage that were watching the race this weekend for Aston Martin that probably would be more worthwhile in the car, but that's fine. Lost weekend for them. We'll see what they do at Imola and what they bring to the table at another street course at Monaco. Here these next couple of races, and then Montreal home Grand Prix, 3 important races, I would say, for Aston in regards to their battle with Mercedes in the Constructors Championship, and if they're really going to be in a battle with them for the Constructors points, or if they're going to be looking towards that back 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Aston Martin is sort of like balanced quite. They're sort of like on a knife edge. You could say, and they're on the brink of sort of dropping into the bottom half in the constructors table. Which, bearing in mind where they were this time last year, is something they'll be not that pleased about. But a team that will be pleased, Alpine. Somebody get the fireworks. Start singing the French national anthem. They've only gone and done it, lads and lasses. They've scored a point. Rachel, Esteban Ocon finished P10 after qualifying P13, and Pierre Gasly finished P12 after qualifying P12. So a point is a point, and after the abysmal start they had to the season, where if you look at Bahrain, does it look to you like Alpine are finally beginning to turn a corner? Because their car can't.
I think they're slowly crawling, like kind of learning how to walk to getting slightly better. So I don't think we're going to see like points every week from them from here on out, but I do think that they're going to celebrate this like Lando's win. They're going to call up McLaren and be like, where are you guys going to the club tonight? And can we get a table next door? Because we're ready to party for our 1 point. And it's the best day ever. They celebrate getting into like Q2, like it's their birthday. Like it's so bad for them this year that this might be their best race of the season if it is. But I don't know. I guess I am happy for them because it does seem like a big fall from, or it is, doesn't seem like it is a giant fall from where they have been. So I don't know. Like I'm happy for them and all, but it's just not that impressive because it's just kind of sad that that's what we're celebrating. We're celebrating 1 point, and it was a little SD bestie up there, and yeah, good for them. Pierre couldn't do anything. They were fighting like siblings at the beginning of the race, racing wheel to wheel when they really shouldn't have been at that point. It was entertaining for sure, but I was like, can they stop? I'm getting stressed out for them. Like let somebody go through. Let's not crash out both Alpines. And I'm sure that they're glad they didn't, because they did get that 1 point.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Bruno Famin is going to be, sort of toasting them a job well done that they didn't manage to crash into each other or break down. But there is still a long way for that team to go, certainly at the moment. I'm just going to brush over the other teams because there's not an awful lot to talk about. So Sauber, they finished with Zhou Guanyu in P14 after starting P19, and Valtteri Bottas finished P16 after starting P16. Bottas was at 1 point second on the driver of the day, though. Not quite sure why. Maybe I missed something. Maybe it's Maybelline. And then the other team as well, just to mention, Williams. Albon, bit of a stinker, finished P19 after starting P14, and Sargent got wiped out by a rampant Danish streak of bacon into, I can't even remember what corner, but we'll talk about that in a second. So on that sort of topic, Haas, Hulkenberg finished P11 after starting P9, and K-Mag finished P18 after starting P18. Bearing in mind, we are strictly talking about the race here. So, anything that were to do with the sprint was covered in yesterday's show. And if you haven't listened to it, I do urge you to go listen to it, because the sprint yesterday was actually an absolute banger. And I don't mean that because K-Mag was just hell-bent on driving into Hamilton. So, at the time of recording, K-Mag, I believe, had 1 penalty in the race. He got a 10-second penalty for something which I lose track by this point. And just to make you aware, I've just looked on the FIA website. He is also under investigation, let me rephrase. He has to report to the stewards alleged breach of Article 55.11 of the FIA F1 regs, entering the pit during the safety car period and not changing his tires. So, just once again, he, if he gets a penalty for that, well, by this point, I don't even know what to say about him. And my question to all of you, and I'll start with you, Jonah, is: do we think what we've seen this weekend from Kevin Magnussen, bear in mind everything we saw in the sprints and some of the stuff we saw in the actual Grand Prix today, do you think we need to perhaps overhaul the point system or revisit the point system and revisit the ban system in F1? Because there's a difference between racing and just being a thug on the track, you could say. What's your take on it?
Well, it's a pretty loaded question. Honestly, I think it was an absolute Haster class that Magnussen was putting on there. But I think in terms of the point system, thank you. No, personally, I don't think it has to be overhauled. I mean, in my opinion, and as controversial as it might be, why are you going to give more points? Are we talking like race points or penalty points?
Penalty points.
Penalty points. Okay. I don't think it has to be overhauled because number one, this is not something that happens every weekend. Okay. It's not like, Magnussen is like known for doing this. I mean, listen, he's got a history, especially with his teammate, more in a different way than we saw this weekend. But I think that it's not something we see all the time, that it's not enough to warrant a switch in the penalty point system or a race ban or a quality ban or the way that the FIA has it set up, because we don't see them frequently. If we saw them all the time and we saw this, way more frequently, if Kevin was doing this every weekend, or we saw more drivers getting bans and more drivers getting loads of penalty points on their super licenses, then okay, maybe it's time to revisit it. But if we don't see it all the time, and drivers aren't idiots, they're not children out there, unless you're Max Verstappen on his debut. I don't think it's something that really has to be revisited, because they're adults, right? At the end of the day, handle it the way an adult would handle the situation. Okay, Kevin, don't do that again. That was really stupid. If you do that again, there's going to be some serious repercussions. I don't know if, as of yet, he's accumulated enough penalty points for some sort of ban. But like, don't. There's no need to impact all the other drivers over one driver having an off weekend or making a few decisions that probably aren't the smartest. Like, I don't think it's necessary, to be honest. I would hate if they did something about it. We'll have to see what Kevin ends up getting for this Haster class that he put on this weekend, because it was, I can't lie, pretty entertaining to watch. But I don't know. That's where I stand. I don't think that we have to change anything quite yet, unless this becomes a frequent and serious issue.
Okay, fair enough. Phil, what's your take on sort of like Magnus's driving, and then also the points around him potentially a race ban or something like that?
No, they're not going to do anything because it's the FIA and it's selective enforcement, and they decide to forget when actual things happen, and then when it's just what they are. Probably K-Mag had too much of some sort of liquid this weekend, or some sort of powder or pill, and maybe it just he was in his time of the month, or I don't know. But in terms of, no offense to anybody, please, since the hatred would really affect my life. But in terms of Kevin Magnussen, it almost was like he was coming unglued this weekend, as though he knows something is coming. And I mean, the team is not great. He already knows his teammates leaving, so there's going to be one new driver there. It wouldn't be out of the realm for that organization to have two new drivers in the team. They do have a new team principal. He's been outclassed by Hulkenberg for the last year and change. There's a lot going on there with Kevin Magnussen. But in the end, nothing's going to happen with him. He'll get whatever penalty points that he's going to get, and then he'll go back to relative anonymity. They keep on wanting to revamp this point and that point. They're going to get points all the way down to the end of the grid, which is just weak. There's nothing wrong with the top 6 or the top 8. I think top 10 is absolute borderline, basically as far as you really should go. But in terms of the penalty points thing, it's selective by the people, the stewards that show up that particular weekend. So they're not consistent. So there's a bigger problem with that than Kevin Magnussen losing his mind for one particular weekend.
That's a very good point. And, let's be fair, the FIA certainly has issues with consistency, to say the least. Rachel, very quickly, I'd just like to get your views on it as well. Just again, same question, thoughts around penalty points, bans, and also sort of K-Mag's antics.
No, I don't think that there needs to be like a change in how they handle penalties and race bans and all of that. I know Haas will not be happy, so I think that they can handle it internally with K-Mag. And yeah, I think it was just one of those weekends where, like, yesterday he was definitely seeing red a little bit, and then it probably just carried into today. Just a rough weekend. Maybe he just needs a reset. But I agree with Jonah. They're all adults, and you need to treat them like adults. And I mean, Kevin knows, like, he's not a shoe-in to be with the team for years and years, and even in the sport forever. So I think he'll realize that soon enough that maybe what he did this weekend, he cannot do that again, because no one's going to be wanting to sign a contract with someone who does that week over week.
Oh, absolutely. And, bearing in mind his teammate is obviously off to Audi, he might be feeling perhaps a little bit more relaxed, but, he definitely needs to watch over his shoulder, because there's a lot of talent coming into F1, and he should definitely be a little bit careful, should we say? So just to round out the show, I'd just like to give you all a chance to promote yourself, tell us a bit about where you're from, what you do, sort of in the F1 space, etc. So Jonah, just want to give us a bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, I'm the resident, or one of the resident Canadians on the show. But yeah, my name is Jonah, the former host of the Soft Tire podcast and current host of the Yappy Hour podcast. Actually, started a new podcast since the last time I was on Grid Talk. But if you want to go follow us, you can follow us at the Yappy Hour Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Or you can follow me at Jonah F1 on Twitter. Yeah, always a pleasure to be here, and always a pleasure to be awake for the for the race review.
Yeah, absolutely. Love having you on as always, mate. Phil, I mentioned you are the host or co-host of the Grip Strip podcast. Do you want to just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the GSP, we talk about all things motorsports and sports here, and talk about NASCAR, IndyCar, F1. Be a bigger part, of course, this weekend because of Lando's triumph. We talk about other motorsports like MotoGP. We'll talk about F1 Academy like you guys do. And whatever else is going on in the world of motorsports. You talk about, as long as it goes fast, we talk about it on the Grip Strip podcast. So myself and my co-host Joshua Fine will be getting into that. We'll be on episode 219 this week. So it's been a good run. And always great to be on. Great job, as always, by you, Tom, and glad to be on with Jonah and Rachel. And with the Grid Talk, it is rare these days, so it's always nice to be on with you guys. And with why am I and Aiden as well? My bad, Aiden. Sorry, apologies. You can go and knock me for that, but
Phil, you're absolutely fine, my friend. No, Aiden is our mastermind behind the scenes, who is the one who makes all the lovely visuals happen on these shows. So yeah, so Aiden, as always, thank you for what you do behind the scenes. It's very much a thankless task. Just for myself, obviously, please give our socials a follow. Also, the main thing I want to give a sort of quote unquote promo to is our sister show, Formula Talk, that I host with Sophia Richmond. That's where we cover everything non-F1, so primarily F2, F3, F1 Academy, and we are certainly going to be looking at some NASCAR and IndyCar. So Phil, especially with Indy 500 coming up, who knows, this panel could be recreated for that. We'll see. Hey, but Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for a back catalogue of shows. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights, and better recording equipment. Also, make sure you do subscribe so you are the first to know when each new episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content. But for now, thank you so much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye. We should be transitioning into a little post show. So I'm just going to pull the YouTube chat down because we have had a couple of questions come in. Let me just pop a quick message in here just so people know. So a couple of questions from Jared Bradley, as always. Jared, good to see you in the chat. And then also a friend of mine, Nez, who has joined the chat, for the ones that's playing Among Us with. He's popped a good question in, so we'll sort of just turn this into like a general talking point.
Recording
all,
stopped.
Nez said, thank you, Zoom. Nez didn't say that, but he did say, is there a way for the F1 drivers program going into next year, and the driver clog up with Alonso clearing up. So, Nez, just so I understand that, mate. There's a sort of like two-pronged approach there. First one being sort of like that move of F2 into F1. You've got people like Drogovic, them, and all the rest of it, sort of almost waiting to sort of take over a seat, and then you've got this specific issue at Aston Martin. So, I mean, please, by this point, just come off mute and let's just have a chat about it, everyone. I'm sure Phil will have a couple of things to say about Alonso taking up that seat, but yeah.
I mean, I'll let the rest of my panel mates go first, I guess, or unless you want me to go first on the whole Aston Martin thing and just get the dagger out. I mean, the fact is, what Fred keeps on holding on for dear life. I don't know for what, but he was doing great in sports cars with Toyota, and he kind of made himself likable when he was driving for Toyota, and now he's, I don't know what he's trying to go on now, especially with the fact that Honda is making their deal with Aston Martin, so that should be interesting. Drogovic waiting there. You have Jack Crawford in the wings, so to speak. You got other guys and gals that are a part of the Aston Martin driver development program. It's a fundamental problem across Formula One, especially with the notion that they also didn't want to have another team come in that was worthy and worthwhile. I guess with Ollie Bierman, it's gonna kind of sort of go away, at least in a small segment, and it may actually get solved even further if they bring two young Ferrari development drivers into Haas. But when you look at the likes of Alpine, they have so many drivers in their development program, and they have two guys that are on multi-year deals. You have Aston Martin that has their situation, which is not going to change until an owner changes. You have Mercedes, who doesn't want to rush one of their young drivers, but they're going to have to. It has like Joey Logano NASCAR vibes to it, which could be bad for Andrea Kimi Antonelli, or maybe they hold on long enough for him to come through. It kind of is like what Jan Magnussen went through many years back when he probably was rushed up to Formula One and then they gave up on him after like a year. There's that aspect to it. You could see what happened to Mick Schumacher. There's that balance that comes with bringing drivers up versus are they ready? And then, do we stay with a veteran? Like, is Valtteri Bottas is he going to stay around? Is Carlos Sainz going to go there, or is he going to decide to take a year off, which is rare in this day and age of Formula One? There's a lot of moving pieces. There aren't that many rides, and you have to wonder what the value is, especially in look at Prema. Prema is going to IndyCar next year. Why would they decide all of a sudden that after all these years, we're going to move to IndyCar? Well, they have a bunch of development drivers that they've been cultivating that have nowhere else to go. But then they come to the IndyCar series minus the whole oval thing, and they're like, they can compete. Maybe we might have to go there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And one thing which Nez has said is, yes, we have seen many seats taken and the driver clock up already with many F2 drivers who are ready to come up. We certainly see this sort of certainly in phases when F2 sort of ends up with a bunch of talent. And the last time we had sort of like multiple drivers come up who were quote unquote worthy, was I think 2019 when today's race winner, 2024 Miami Grand Prix winner Lando Norris, still not going to get tired of saying that, where he, George Russell and Albon came up because they all got promoted in that same year. Jared Bradley also he's put a question in here, and this is sort of like a bit of a sort of like expansion question on earlier. Do Haas keep K-Mag next year or even to the end of the year, or do they bring in a new driver and let K-Mag go? So who wants to take that one first? Go on, Jonah.
Yeah, okay, I can do that.
I'll
I
come to you
mean,
after, Rich.
honestly, I mean, it's a tough question, and I'll kind of base it off of a little bit of what Philip was talking about, is that the driver assortment we have in F2 is very talented, but what we saw with Mick and with the other guy is when you take a couple of drivers that are quote unquote ready for Formula One, and then you stick them in something that is so painfully slow and really not that good. Now, the Haas this year is a little bit better than the one that they drove. But when you stick those two guys or whoever in that car that isn't very good, you're not going to see their capabilities, right? We saw Mick was a proven winner in Formula 2. Now, I understand that he's, has the tendency of being better in his second season, which I don't really think he was with Haas. But you put him in a car that's not very competitive. It's not very good. You're not getting their talent. And you're the only guys that you're going to see get their talent out of a car that's like not really that good are the superstars, right? Those are the only ones you're ever going to see really get the most out of a car that's okay on a good day. My point about that is that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know what I mean? Like, if you have a driver that's succeeding, for example, Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin, the other seat, that's a different story. Okay, daddy's money, I get it. Gives us a bad look as Canadians. But when you look at the other guy in Fernando, I get it. He's got experience. He's an older gentleman, but he's very, very, very good at what he does. Why would Aston Martin go with an unproven talent that has never properly driven a Formula One car for an extended period of time, aka a whole season, and throw out a multiple world champion in Fernando Alonso, who's probably getting more out of that car on a regular basis, not exactly this weekend, on a regular basis than someone who's never driven one frequently would. The way I see it is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. K-Mag, it's one weekend. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one weekend. Like, yeah, I wouldn't use this weekend, the Miami Grand Prix, Lando Norris, let's go. I wouldn't use this race weekend as like a basis of what he's capable of. And yeah, okay, Kevin, you had a really crappy Miami Grand Prix. Time to kick you out of your drive. I don't see that happening. I don't see Haas risking it with their second driver. To my knowledge, the other seat that Nico is vacating isn't filled. Bring one guy up there. There's no need to revisit your entire driver lineup. You kicked Kevin out. Didn't work. You brought Kevin back. What are you going to do? Kick him out again? I don't really understand the point. So I say, you got one empty seat already. Give that to a young driver. Don't try and sign someone who's on the grid. Nobody wants that seat. Anyone who has any dignity doesn't want that seat because it's not competitive. Give someone a chance. Let them use that. But keep Kevin. And if Kevin doesn't really perform next year, okay, then you look at filling your second seat, because then you got a guy who's got a year under his belt. As of right now, if I'm Komatsu, I don't get rid of him.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I do kind of agree with you there, Jonah. It's I think it's almost a bit of a sort of knee-jerk reaction. The whole K-Mag thing. Yes, I know there was the thing it was Saudi when he was certainly holding up the field and he got a penalty or two for some rather robust defending. But yeah, it's he's a. If it continues, then possibly questions might need to be asked. But I think at the moment, he'll sort of just take a week off, because I presume we've got a break before Imola. I'd be worried if we didn't. And then we'll see who he sort of like barrels out in going through TOSA in 2 weeks' time. Race, did you have a point you wanted to add then as well? I did see you sort of like almost do like a mime act where you're getting ready to speak.
Yeah, I just feel like with Haas and the money situation with Haas as well, that's something they always have to think about. They're not going to want these young drivers that cost them a ton of money like they did with Mick and Mazepin. So they're not going to want that. If they're going to have one driver who can, although looked a little bit sketchy today, can keep it together and not crash the car a bunch, they're going to at least want that one. I think it's a different story for other teams that have bags of cash in their pocket at all times and can make those more risky moves. But Haas, I think, has realized they are not the team for two rookies. It's just too risky money-wise for them. So I feel like, yeah, they'll definitely keep Kevin for next year. I don't see why they would get rid of him unless, like like we said, unless he continues this crap that we saw this weekend.
Yeah, that's probably a very, very good way of putting it. One final question from Jared, and this will be the last one because it's sort of midnight, and I'm probably going to be getting ready for bed soon. He said, "I can see the point for keeping K-Mag. Same question for Sergeant, then question mark. I can't see the rest of that past the plodding arrow thing. Is he? Sorry, I genuinely cannot see it because usually was put a solid love heart over the last two words, and I can't read it. I think he said, is he gone soon?" But I say thank you to my esteemed colleagues on the panel for doing that. So yeah, so we'll do a quick round robin on this one, and then yeah, we'll probably call it a day. Do we think Sargent should be kept until the end of the season then, at least?
I don't think he's going to be kept till the end of the season. I think he's going to get kicked after Montreal. I think once they have the European season going, whether it's Andrea Kimi Antonelli, whether it's et cetera, Mercedes or Williams Jr. driver, I think this season their car is pretty terrible. They've taken a huge step backwards in performance, and so you have Alex Albon debating leaving too. So you're in a real tough spot. Like Rachel brought up the point about Haas. I mean, also Jonah too. I mean, with where they're at, I mean, they're not a very competitive team, but what about Williams? Like it's not just the fact that Logan has had, I mean, the whole situation with Alex Albon and that wreck at Australia really reared its ugly head in terms of their cars, their situation. They're going to pull the plug on Logan soon, and whether he can't get out of Q1 almost regularly, it may just be that the car is really not that good, and now even if he does drives to his potential, it won't really matter. It's a case of who they're going to put in the car. Now, if they say they don't have anybody, then he gets kept along, as long as he doesn't crash, which of course today he had no choice or no chance. So, I mean, it's unfortunate for him. It's bad for American drivers. Even if he meant well or tried his best, the PR in Formula One with American drivers is Michael Andretti fought 1993, and then Scott Speed being run over by Franz Tost and Marco. I mean, and now Sargent. I mean, it's like an absolute abomination for any of them. And it's like, even if you were the best American driver, if you had a lot of talent like Colton Herta, are you really going to get a fair shot? I mean, that's the real question with Formula One these days with Americans.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think Sargent should be kept until at least the end of the season. Rachel, Jonah, do you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, I agree till the end of the season would be like what I would consider like a fair shakeout of him, but I don't necessarily see that happening. I feel like him and James don't have that like type of relationship where he would want to, develop him throughout the season. He would have no problem of letting him go. He's always said he wasn't my pick from the beginning, ever since he got that spot. So I would like to see him finish out the season. I would love to see him succeed. But I don't really think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be kicked out.
Yeah. What do you think, Jonah? Do you think he'll be excuse me, do you think he'll be gone, or?
There's a there's a difference between what I think and what I want to happen. I'd like him to stay the rest of the year. I think that's fair, as Rachel said. I mean, give the kid a couple of years in the car. If it doesn't work out, doesn't work out. At least you gave it a shot. Don't kick him out halfway through. I'm not a fan of that. I don't think it's fair at all. I didn't think it was fair with DeVries, even though he was pretty god awful. But I don't think it was fair with DeVries, and I don't think it's fair with Logan. But I have a sick feeling that it's going to happen, and I have a sick feeling that it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And I agree with Philip's point that it could happen before the European leg. And I don't want it to, but I think that it might. I don't think it's fair, but nothing's fair in sports. That's why we love it.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, I can see why he would get the boot. I do think it'd be unfair because I think he started the season pretty well. But you know, F1 is ultimately a results-based business, and one could argue he's not getting the results. You know, he still hasn't got any points this year. You know, so it's not looking too good for him. So on that note, I'm going to bring the post show to a close because the cat is going mental next to me. She's like waiting for me to get to bed because she knows she's going to get dreamies. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you once again. That was a really enjoyable show. And once again, say it out loud. Lando Norris. Thanks everybody in the stream for listening, watching, partaking, commenting, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.